In the vast ocean of ancient myths and mysteries, few stories have endured quite like that of Atlantis. It's a tale of grandeur and destruction, of a mighty empire swallowed by the sea in a single day and night. But before Atlantis became a fixture of speculative history, fringe theories, and blockbuster films, it began, like many great legends, in the mind of a philosopher. The story of Atlantis first surfaces not in folk legend or oral tradition, but in the carefully composed writings of Plato, the great Athenian thinker of the 4th century BCE. In his 2 dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato recounts a tale that his ancestor Solon allegedly brought back from Egypt, one that had been carved into temple walls and preserved by Egyptian priests for thousands of years. It was a tale of a mighty civilization, rich in wealth and power, that once ruled beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the ancient name for what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. According to Plato, this empire of Atlantis was larger than Libya and Asia combined. Its kings descended from the god Poseidon, who had fathered 10 sons with a mortal woman. The capital city gleamed with gold and orichalcum, and was laid out in concentric rings of land and water, an engineering marvel said to be unmatched by any civilization, ancient or modern. But this grandeur was not eternal. In time, the Atlanteans grew greedy, corrupt, and lustful for power. They waged war against the rest of the known world, including Athens. According to the story, it was the virtuous Athenians who stood alone against the empire and repelled the invasion. As punishment from the gods for Atlantis' hubris, the entire island was destroyed in a cataclysm. In a single day and night of misfortune, it sank into the sea, lost forever. To the modern reader, this story reads like allegory, a moral tale of pride, power, and punishment. And that is exactly how many scholars interpret it. They argue that Plato never intended Atlantis to be taken literally. Like many of his stories, it was a philosophical parable, a metaphor for the ideal society, Athens, standing in stark contrast to a decadent and fallen empire, Atlantis. In this view, Atlantis wasn't history, it was warning. But here's where the mystery begins to deepen. Plato wasn't known for inventing myths without purpose. He often built his philosophical arguments on real cultural or historical references. Could it be that the story of Atlantis was more than fiction, perhaps a distorted memory of a real event or civilization? Plato was specific. He gave dates, claiming that Atlantis fell 9,000 years before Solon's time, placing around 9,600 BCE. He described the location as being beyond the Pillars of Heracles, suggesting a real-world geography. He offered details about the society's structure, their technologies, their values, and even their downfall. For something intended purely as an allegory, the level of description is curiously elaborate. This has led to centuries of debate. Was Plato passing along a myth that had some basis in truth, picked up from older civilizations like the Egyptians? Did he reinterpret a real cataclysm, like a volcanic eruption, a massive flood, or the fall of a Bronze Age empire, and dress it up in philosophical trappings? Or was he simply crafting a powerful moral fable and never expected anyone to take it literally? The discussion didn't end with Plato. For much of history, Atlantis lay dormant, mentioned in texts here and there, but not widely explored. It wasn't until the Renaissance and Enlightenment periods that interest in the lost world began to explode. As European explorers charted unknown oceans and uncovered ancient ruins, the idea that there might really be a sunken world waiting to be found captured the popular imagination. In the centuries since, Atlantis has been found in dozens of locations around the globe, from the Caribbean to Antarctica, from Spain to the Sahara. Theories have multiplied, as have hoaxes. Writers, mystics, adventurers, and scientists have all taken their turn at trying to solve the puzzle. Yet it all traces back to that original, puzzling source, Plato, and the ambiguity of his tale, neither clearly fact nor clearly fiction, has made Atlantis an enduring enigma. The legend is tantalizing because it sits right at the boundary of credibility. It sounds just plausible enough to make us wonder. In this series, we will journey through time, geography, and speculation to examine Atlantis from every angle. We'll sift through ancient texts, dive into archaeological theories, weigh scientific evidence, and confront the sensationalism that often clouds the truth. Whether Atlantis was a real place, a symbolic myth, or a misunderstood echo of something else, one thing is certain. it continues to captivate us. Because deep down, we all long for a glimpse of the unknown. And Atlantis, whether legend or lie, offers just that, a doorway into forgotten, a window into what might have been. Next, in segment, we'll explore the possibility that Plato didn't just invent the story, but that he was echoing a real, ancient memory. Could there have been a prehistoric civilization, now lost to history, that inspired the myth of Atlantis? Stay with us. What if Atlantis wasn't simply the product of Plato's imagination, but instead a poetic echo of something real, something ancient that left its mark not only in myth but in memory? As we peel back the layers of this enduring mystery, we're left with a compelling question. Could Plato's Atlantis have been rooted in truth, even if the details were distorted over time? Let's begin with the source Plato cites. His ancestor Solon, a respected Athenian lawmaker and poet who visited Egypt around the 6th century BC. According to Plato, Solon had conversations with Egyptian priests at the Temple of Neith in Sais. These priests supposedly shared with him a story passed down for thousands of years, a tale of a mighty civilization that existed 9,000 years earlier and vanished beneath the sea. Solon, astonished, returned to Greece intending to turn the tale into epic poetry, but never completed the work. Plato claimed to inherit these notes and later transformed them into the dialogues Timaeus and Critias. If we take Plato at his word, then the story originated in ancient Egyptian records, not Greek fiction. But that claim opens up several new challenges. First, there is no surviving Egyptian text that mentions Atlantis by name. Egypt's recorded history is incredibly vast, but nothing explicitly supports Plato's account. Could the records have been lost? Perhaps. Egypt has suffered from looting, conquest, and erosion of time. But skeptics argue it's just as likely that Plato invented the attribution to Solon to lend his tale credibility. Still, dismissing the entire story as fabrication might be premature. Across the world, scattered among various cultures, are echoes of a great flood of lost lands and destroyed civilizations. From the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to the biblical story of Noah, from Hindu texts like the Matsya Purana to Native American legends, many ancient societies speak of a cataclysmic flood that reshaped humanity's path. Could these stories be distant memories of a real event, something massive enough to become a global myth? Modern science lends some support to this idea. Roughly 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, the Earth experienced a dramatic climate shift known as the Younger Dryas event. It was a period of sudden cooling followed by rapid warming. Ice sheets melted, sea levels rose sharply, and the coastlines we know today were completely redrawn. Whole areas of land, including what are now submerged parts of the continental shelf, were swallowed by the sea. Human settlements, if they existed there, would have vanished without a trace. This period aligns intriguingly with the 9,000-year gap Plato claimed between Atlantis and Solon's time. Though scholars point out that Greek numerical systems and translations from Egyptian could have led to errors in calculation, the idea that a civilization could have been destroyed by rising seas is no longer far-fetched. In fact, it's supported by geology. There's also the possibility that Atlantis wasn't a single place, but composite memory, a blend of real events and civilizations passed down orally and across cultures. Some researchers suggest Plato might have been inspired by the destruction of Minoan civilization, which flourished on the island of Crete and nearby Thera, modern-day Santorini. Around 1600 BCE, a massive volcanic eruption devastated Thera and triggered tsunamis that crippled Minoan cities. Could this catastrophic event have inspired the story of a once great civilization swallowed by the sea? The Minoans fit several elements of the Atlantis myth. They were advanced, seafaring, and had elaborate palaces with plumbing, art, and trade networks. Their sudden decline was mysterious and devastating. But their society existed only 1,000 years before Plato, not 9,000. So again, the timeline raises doubts. Still, human memory is flexible. Oral traditions often stretch in compressed time, and symbols replace specifics. What if Atlantis is not just one place or event, but a cultural archetype, an ancient psychological imprint of disaster, pride, and downfall? Perhaps Plato simply formalized what humanity had long remembered in fragments. Then there's the curious detail of Atlantis being beyond the Pillars of Heracles, an expression used by the Greeks to describe the Strait of Gibraltar. If Plato was being literal, this places Atlantis somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, which raises further questions. Could there have been a civilization on a now-sunken island or continent beyond Europe's western edge? Or was beyond the pillars metaphorical, signifying an unknown, far-away place rather than a specific spot? As we examine these ideas, we find ourselves teetering between historical plausibility and mythological resonance. The story of Atlantis is rich enough to be metaphor, but it's also tantalizing enough to make us wonder, what if it wasn't entirely invented? What if Plato drew from echoes of real places, real events, and real memories, stitching them together into a philosophical tapestry? This possibility is what continues to draw researchers, scholars, and adventurers to the legend. Atlantis might not exist as Plato described it, but that doesn't mean there wasn't something, a precursor civilization, a sunken land, a forgotten past, that inspired the tale. And if there was, we must ask, where did it go, and why can't we find it? In the next segment, we'll explore why the idea of Atlantis has such a strong hold on our imagination. What makes the concept of a lost, advanced civilization so irresistible? Why do we keep searching? Why does Atlantis captivate us so deeply? Why has this story, just a few pages from Plato's dialogues, spurred centuries of exploration, obsession, and speculation? The answer lies not just in the mystery of whether Atlantis existed, but in what Atlantis represents. At its core, the tale of Atlantis is the ultimate lost utopia, a golden civilization said to possess wealth, wisdom, advanced technology, and perfect governance. According to Plato's account, Atlantis was not only grand in its architecture and resources, but also in its moral and societal structure. The city was divinely ordered, governed by 10 kings under the supreme guidance of Poseidon's laws. Its people initially lived in harmony, practiced virtue, and upheld justice. It was a kind of civilization we dream about, a model society untouched by greed or decay, and that, perhaps, is where the psychological hook lies. The Atlantis myth taps into our most primordial longing, for paradise lost, for a perfect society that once existed but was tragically destroyed. It offers a mirror to our own civilization's flaws. If Atlantis was real and fell due to its moral decline, what does that say about us? Are we walking the same path? This allegorical element was likely intentional on Plato's part. He crafted Atlantis to contrast with his ideal version of Athens. In Critias, the Atlanteans slowly abandoned their original nobility, becoming greedy, corrupt, and power-hungry. Their downfall is not merely geological, it's spiritual. The gods, angered by their decline, send a great cataclysm. Atlantis becomes not just a lost world, but a warning. No matter how mighty or advanced a civilization becomes, it is doomed if it loses its moral compass. Yet modern interpretations often strip away the moral lesson and focus instead on the mystery and magnificence. The idea of a sunken civilization with technology surpassing those of today is irresistible. Over time, the myth has expanded beyond Plato's vision. Writers, mystics, and theorists have reimagined Atlantis as a place of crystal power, airships, and psychic abilities, a civilization so advanced it almost resembles science fiction. The 19th and 20th centuries saw a surge in these romanticized versions of Atlantis. American Congressman Ignatius Donnelly, in his 1882 book Atlantis, The Antediluvian World, proposed that Atlantis was a cradle of all ancient civilizations. He argued that its influence spread to Egypt, India, Mesopotamia, and even the Americas. Though lacking in scientific evidence, Donnelly's work was immensely popular and influenced generations of Atlantis believers. This hunger for a lost golden age also ties into our collective fear of collapse. In a world where empires rise and fall, where cities vanish under sand or war, the idea that something great could be wiped off the map resonates. Atlantis isn't just about mystery. It's about impermanence. It reminds us that nothing, no matter how powerful, is immune to destruction. But there's also hope in the story. The hope that maybe, somewhere, remnants of this perfect world still exist, waiting to be found, waiting to teach us how to live better. This has driven explorers to search the seas, divers to scour the ocean floor, and researchers to examine every clue, every anomaly that could hint at a forgotten world. And let's not overlook how Atlantis fits into hero's journey, another narrative pattern deeply embedded in our psyche. In many retellings, Atlantis becomes a goal for the adventurer, the seeker of truth. It's the El Dorado of the sea, the holy grail of archaeology. To find Atlantis is to touch something eternal, to uncover the wisdom of the ancients and perhaps restore what was lost. This allure isn't limited to scholars or explorers. Atlantis has permeated pop culture, appearing in everything from Disney films to superhero universes. In these portrayals, Atlantis is often depicted as a glittering underwater kingdom, mysterious, majestic, and fiercely protected. These interpretations may stray from Plato's vision, but they reflect our desire to believe, to dream that there is more beneath the surface of our known world. But belief can be a double-edged sword. The romanticism surrounding Atlantis has also given rise to pseudoscience, racial theories, and New Age myths. Some have used the myth to argue for the superiority of one culture over another, or to promote unfounded theories about alien influence. These distortions show how a legend can be twisted to fit agendas. Despite this, the central appeal remains powerful. Atlantis represents what we yearn for, a world of peace, wisdom, and power. And it represents what we fear, the loss of that world and the consequences of arrogance and decay. So we continue to search, not just for ruins or sunken stones, but for a meaning that goes deeper than the ocean floor. Atlantis is not merely about what was, but about what could be, a symbol of possibility, peril, an eternal human quest to rediscover the best parts of ourselves. In the next segment, we'll explore how the story of Atlantis evolved over the centuries, from ancient Greece to the modern day. How did a philosophical tale become one of history's most enduring obsessions? From the moment Plato penned his dialogues over 2,000 years ago, the legend of Atlantis has never truly faded, but has evolved, twisted, expanded, and reinterpreted across centuries. What began as a philosophical allegory has transformed into one of the greatest archaeological mysteries, inspiring everything from scientific inquiry to fantastical fiction. To understand how Atlantis captured the human imagination so thoroughly, we need to trace the path of the myth through time. After Plato, Atlantis virtually vanished from serious discussion for centuries. His story was, at the time, not taken literally. Ancient scholars like Aristotle, who was Plato's student, is said to have dismissed it outright, reportedly stating, "He who invented it also destroyed it." The general consensus in the classical world was that Atlantis was a cautionary tale, a narrative device meant to support Plato's ideas about hubris, justice, and the ideal state. But the Middle Ages brought a different view. With the decline of classical learning and the rise of Christian theology, most ancient texts were reinterpreted through a religious lens. Atlantis was rarely mentioned, and when it was usually dismissed as pagan fiction. Yet beneath the surface, the myth remained alive, waiting for rediscovery. That rediscovery came during the Renaissance, a period of renewed interest in classical antiquity. Scholars began re-examining Greek and Roman texts, and Plato's works once again found eager readers. The idea of Atlantis began to tantalize explorers and thinkers, especially as new worlds were being discovered. The age of exploration brought encounters with unfamiliar civilizations in the Americas, Africa, and Asia, prompting some Europeans to speculate. Could these lands and people be remnants of Atlantis? This speculation reached new heights in the 19th century, particularly with the publication of Atlantis, The Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly in 1882. A U.S. congressman and amateur historian, Donnelly argued that Atlantis was a real, advanced civilization that served as the mother culture for Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica. He suggested that the great myths of floods and lost continents from different cultures all pointed back to this singular, sunken homeland. Donnelly's book was a sensation. Though lacking credible archaeological evidence, it struck a powerful chord with the public. His work inspired countless imitators, creating a wave of Atlantis enthusiasm that crested well into the 20th century. During this time, Atlantis was no longer just a lost island. It became a civilizational nucleus, a mystical powerhouse responsible for shaping the ancient world. At the same time, occult movements began weaving Atlantis into their belief systems. Theosophist Helena Blavatsky described Atlantis as the home of a spiritually advanced race known as the Atlanteans, who eventually fell due to moral corruption. Her disciple, Rudolf Steiner, expanded the idea, suggesting that Atlanteans possess psychic powers and advanced technologies that modern humans could only dream of. These esoteric ideas made Atlantis a focal point in the New Age movement, which flourished in the 20th century. Suddenly, Atlantis was not just a place in the past. It became a metaphysical symbol, a lost realm of higher consciousness and energy that some believed could be tapped into through meditation, crystals, or spiritual awakening. Meanwhile, mainstream science remained skeptical. Archaeologists and geologists largely dismiss Atlantis as fiction. However, a few intriguing discoveries kept the flame alive. The ruins of Troy, once thought to be purely mythical, were unearthed by Heinrich Schliemann in the 1870s, proving that ancient legends could have truth at their core. This fueled the belief that Atlantis, too, might one day be found. In the 20th and 21st centuries, new theories began to emerge, each attempting to place Atlantis somewhere on the map. The Minoan civilization on Crete and Thera, destroyed by a volcanic eruption around 1600 BCE. The Azores Islands, mid-Atlantic remnants of a possible sunken landmass. Antarctica, proposed as a pre-glacial civilization buried under ice. Spain's Donana wetlands, theorized to be remnants of an ancient coastal city. Even South America has been floated as a candidate, particularly around the Amazon basin. Each of these theories has its champions and its critics, and while none has produced definitive proof of Atlantis, all share a common thread: the desire to believe. Pop culture, too, has played a huge role in shaping the modern perception of Atlantis. In films, books, and video games, Atlantis is often portrayed as a technologically advanced underwater kingdom, sometimes futuristic, sometimes magical, but always fascinating. From Disney's Atlantis, The Lost Empire, to the DC Universe's Aquaman, the myth has taken on new life, often unrecognizable from Plato's original vision, but deeply embedded in our collective imagination. Why does the myth persist, even after millennia without evidence? Because Atlantis isn't just a story, it's a canvas, a blank space onto which each era projects its dreams, its fears, and its ideals. It reflects our hope for greatness, our warning of downfall, and our eternal thirst for the unknown. As we've seen, the myth of Atlantis has shifted dramatically through the ages, from allegory to obsession, from lost history to pop culture legend. But what if, amid the embellishments and theories, a kernel of truth still exists? In our next segment, we'll examine the scientific investigations and expeditions that have tried to separate fact from fiction. Where have we searched for Atlantis, and what have we found? For centuries, the myth of Atlantis has beckoned explorers, scholars, treasure hunters, and conspiracy theorists alike. They have pored over maps, studied ancient texts, launched expeditions, and even scanned the ocean floor, all in the hope of uncovering the truth behind Plato's lost civilization. In this segment, we dive into the numerous efforts to find Atlantis, the discoveries that have sparked hope, and the deceptions that have muddied the waters. Let's start with one of the most popular theories: Atlantis as a Minoan civilization. In the early 20th century, scholars began to take a fresh look at the volcanic island of Thera, now known as Santorini, in the Aegean Sea. Around 1600 BCE, Thera experienced one of the most cataclysmic volcanic eruptions in recorded history. The explosion obliterated much of the island, sending tsunamis across the eastern Mediterranean and devastating nearby coastal cultures, including the Minoans of Crete. The Minoan civilization was remarkably advanced for its time. It featured multi-story buildings, complex plumbing systems, vibrant frescoes, and an intricate social structure. Could Plato have heard whispers of this disaster through distorted oral histories and crafted them into the tale of Atlantis? The similarities are compelling. A rich, island-based civilization, advanced and powerful, destroyed in a day and night by a great natural catastrophe. Scholars like K.T. Frost, Spirit and Marinatos, and later Gavin Menzies have all linked the Minoans to the Atlantis legend. However, while this theory is scientifically plausible, critics point out the geographic discrepancy. Plato placed Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Heracles, generally believed to be the Strait of Gibraltar, not in the Aegean. This leads us to the Atlantic Ocean itself, where the search has been most concentrated. The Azores Islands, a Portuguese archipelago located along the mid-Atlantic ridge, have long fascinated Atlantis theorists. These islands sit on submerged mountain peaks, suggesting the possibility of once being part of a larger landmass. In the 1940s and 50s, explorers like Edgar Cayce, the so-called sleeping prophet, claimed Atlantis would be discovered near Bimini in the Caribbean. Cayce's psychic readings described a technologically advanced society with flying machines and healing crystals, and he predicted that ruins would rise in the 1960s. Incredibly, in 1968, divers discovered what appeared to be massive stone formations off the coast of Bimini Island in the Bahamas, dubbed the Bimini Road. These rectangular limestone blocks led to a frenzy of Atlantis speculation. Could this be a roadway or wall of the sunken city? Sadly, subsequent studies concluded that the formation was likely natural, the result of beach rock fracturing along joints in the seabed. Still, the Bimini Road remains a cornerstone for believers, a symbol of hope that maybe not everything's been explained away. Then there's the Spanish theory, centered on the Donana wetlands in southern Spain. In 2011, a team led by Professor Richard Freund claimed to have found signs of an ancient city buried under mudflats near Cadiz. Using satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and deep-core drilling, they identified circular and rectangular patterns that resemble Plato's description of Atlantis' layout. Freund's team theorized that a tsunami might have wiped out the city, and survivors may have built memorial cities inland, echoing the original. Yet mainstream archaeologists remain cautious. The structures might be remnants of later Roman or Tartessian settlements. Additionally, the lack of definitive artifacts tied directly to Plato's Atlantis meant the discovery, while intriguing, remained speculative. Nevertheless, the idea that Atlantis might have once sat near the Mediterranean's edge persists as a tantalizing possibility. And what about Antarctica? Though less supported in academic circles, some theorists propose that Atlantis lies under the ice. They point to ancient maps, like the Piri-Reis map of 1513, which some believe depicts an ice-free Antarctic coast, suggesting ancient knowledge of the continent. Proponents of this idea often lean into theories of pole shifts and prehistoric high technology. But most geologists argue that Antarctica has been covered in ice for millions of years, long before human civilizations emerged. Unfortunately, the passion for finding Atlantis has also led to fraud and fabrication. In the 19th century, discoveries of Atlantis artifacts conveniently supported various pseudoscientific racial theories, suggesting Atlantis as the origin of superior Aryan races. These ideas were co-opted by extremist groups, distorting Plato's tale for dangerous ideological purposes. Even into the 21st century, some claim to have found Atlantis using Google Earth, pointing to supposed man-made grids on the ocean floor. However, Google clarified these were data artifacts from sonar mapping, not ruins. Yet such claims continue to go viral, proof that Atlantis still ignites the imagination, even if the evidence doesn't always hold up. Modern science, equipped with sonar, satellite imagery, deep-sea submersibles, and geological analysis, has explored vast portions of the ocean. But so far, no definitive trace of Plato's Atlantis has been found. Some scholars suggest it never existed in a literal sense at all, and was instead a powerful mythical metaphor that grew beyond its philosophical roots. Still, the hunt continues, not just for ruins or artifacts, but for connection, for meaning, and for proof that greatness once lost can be found again. In our next segment, we'll delve into some of the most popular theories and locations proposed for Atlantis. From Crete to Cuba, the Atlantic Ocean to the Amazon basin, we'll examine each theory's strengths, weaknesses, and how they stack up against Plato's original account. Despite centuries of searching, the location of Atlantis remains one of the greatest geographical riddles of all time. Plato gave some tantalizing clues in his dialogues: an island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, often equated with the Strait of Gibraltar, larger than Libya and Asia combined, and destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune. These details, however, have led to a wide range of interpretations. In this segment, we explore the most enduring and intriguing theories that attempt to put Atlantis on the map, spanning the Mediterranean, the Atlantic Ocean, and the Americas. 1. The Minoan hypothesis, Crete and Thera, Santorini. One of the most academically respected theories places Atlantis in the Aegean Sea. The Minoan civilization, centered on the island of Crete and heavily influenced by Thera, is seen by many as the real-world inspiration for Plato's tale. The evidence is compelling. The Minoans were incredibly advanced for their time, featuring paved roads, palaces with plumbing, and detailed art. Their sudden downfall around 1600 BC coincides with the Thera eruption, a massive volcanic event that devastated the region. This catastrophe likely spawned tsunamis and widespread destruction, paralleling Plato's tale of a civilization destroyed in a single night. The problem? Plato said Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, while Thera and Crete are east of them. Still, some scholars argue that Plato may have misplaced the geography or used the pillars symbolically. 2. The Iberian Peninsula, Spain, and the Dardanelles wetlands. The southwestern coast of Spain has also attracted attention. In particular, the Dardanelles wetlands near Cadiz have been proposed as a site for Atlantis by researchers such as Richard Freund and others using satellite imaging and radar. They discovered ring-like formations beneath the marshes that closely match Plato's description of Atlantis' concentric layout. Additionally, ancient flood layers and artifacts suggest there may have been a thriving Bronze Age port city destroyed by a tsunami or flood. However, skeptics point out that while the structures are fascinating, they may belong to a later civilization, possibly Tartessos, a wealthy Iberian city that itself was steeped in mystery. 3. Mid-Atlantic theories. The Azores and underwater ridges. Many Atlantis seekers believe Plato meant exactly what he said, that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles in the Atlantic Ocean. The Azores, a chain of volcanic islands, rest along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a tectonic plate boundary with dramatic undersea features. Some claim these islands are the peaks of a sunken continent. Early 20th century scientists proposed that seismic or volcanic activity could have submerged a landmass, and even today, sonar scans show submerged plateaus and seamounts in the region. Proponents argue that these could be the remnants of Atlantis, but no verified archaeological remains, no buildings, roads, or artifacts have been found in the deep waters near the Azores. Moreover, geologists argue that no large landmass has sunk in the Atlantic in the time frame Plato describes. 4. The Caribbean, Bimini Road, and Cuba. Another popular Atlantis theory points to the Caribbean, especially around the Bahamas. In 1968, divers discovered the Bimini Road, a strange underwater formation of rectangular stones off Bimini Island. Many claimed it was a remnant of an ancient Atlantean harbor or causeway. Even more intriguing is the submerged structure off the coast of Cuba, found in 2001 by researchers using sonar. The formation appeared to have symmetrical patterns, resembling urban grids, leading to speculation that it could be an ancient city swallowed by the sea. However, scientific evaluation suggests that the Bimini Road is likely a natural limestone formation, shaped by coastal processes. As for the Cuban structure, it's extremely deep, too deep for any known civilization to have built it during human history, unless the sea levels were vastly different than believed. 5. South America, Bolivia, and the Amazon. Some Atlantis researchers propose that Plato's Atlantis wasn't an island at all, but a metaphor for a lost inland civilization. One radical theory places Atlantis in South America, particularly in Bolivia's Altiplano region, near the ancient city of Tiwanaku. This theory argues that the Andean highlands were home to a forgotten maritime culture with complex city planning and spiritual sophistication. Proponents cite the ring mountain formations, similarities in flood myths, and even Plato's descriptions of elephant-like animals, perhaps referencing llamas or other megafauna, as circumstantial evidence. However, the Andes are far from the ocean, and most mainstream historians do not consider this theory credible, though it remains fascinating in its attempt to link Atlantis with the vast, largely unexplored mysteries of the Amazon basin. 6. Antarctica, a frozen Atlantis? A fringe but persistent theory is that Atlantis lies beneath the ice of Antarctica. Advocates of this idea suggest that a pole shift thousands of years ago relocated a once temperate continent to its current frozen state, burying an entire civilization in ice. Supporters point at ancient maps like the Piri Reis map, which some claim show Antarctica's coastline free of ice. Critics argue that these interpretations are speculative and that Antarctica has been glaciated for at least 34 million years, well before any human civilizations could have existed. across continents and oceans. The search for Atlantis has inspired generations of explorers, archaeologists, and dreamers. Each theory, while lacking conclusive proof, reflects something deeper, a yearning to discover lost greatness, to explain ancient mysteries, or make sense of Plato's enduring puzzle. But how close are we, really, to solving this ancient riddle? Have modern technologies brought us any nearer to truth? In the next segment, we'll explore how science, archaeology, and geology have responded to the Atlantis myth, what we've learned, and what still eludes us. For all the mystery and wonder that surrounds Atlantis, modern science continues to cast a critical eye on the legend as technologies have advanced, allowing for deep-sea mapping, satellite imaging, and precise geological dating. Many of the claims surrounding Atlantis have come under intense scrutiny. In this segment, we examine what mainstream science and archaeology say about Atlantis, how they interpret Plato's account, and whether the legend stands up to rational investigation. Let's begin with the geological argument, perhaps the most fundamental challenge to Atlantis' existence. Plato describes Atlantis as a vast island continent that sank into the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. However, geologists argue that continents or large land masses do not simply sink. Tectonic plates shift over millions of years, but the kind of rapid submersion Plato describes contradicts our understanding of how Earth's crust behaves. There have been massive floods, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions in history, such as the eruption of Thera around 1600 BCE, or the collapse of Doggerland in the North Sea, but none correspond to a sudden, complete disappearance of civilization on the scale Plato described. Moreover, no sunken continent has been found in the Atlantic Ocean despite extensive sonar mapping of the seafloor. Next, consider archaeology. Despite centuries of searching, no verified artifacts, structures, or inscriptions have ever been recovered that match Plato's description of Atlantis. Underwater ruins found in places like the Caribbean, Mediterranean, and off the coast of India have occasionally been hailed as possible Atlantean remnants, but these claims often fall apart under academic scrutiny. In most cases, they turn out to be natural formations or misidentified ruins from known civilizations. One infamous example is the so-called Bimini Road in the Bahamas. Discovered in 1968, this formation of rectangular limestone blocks seemed too orderly to be natural. Enthusiasts quickly dubbed it a remnant of Atlantis. However, scientific analysis revealed the road to be a natural occurrence, limestone fractured and shaped by tidal forces and erosion. This pattern of hopeful discovery followed by disappointment is a recurring theme in Atlantis research. Skeptics also point to the absence of any corroborating historical records. Plato is the only ancient source to offer a detailed account of Atlantis. There is no mention of it in Egyptian texts, despite his claim that the story came from Egyptian priests. Nor is there mention of Atlantis in the works of Herodotus, the father of history, who detailed many civilizations around the known world. This lack of supporting evidence leads many scholars to conclude that Plato invented Atlantis as a moral allegory. In his dialogues, especially Critias and Timaeus, Plato uses Atlantis to illustrate a philosophical point. The Atlanteans became arrogant, corrupt, and decadent, and were punished by the gods. This fits with Plato's recurring theme that hubris leads to downfall, the same message found in his ideas about ideal societies, and the dangers of power without virtue. Yet despite the lack of hard evidence, belief in Atlantis endures. Why? One reason is that Atlantis taps into the human fascination with lost civilizations. The idea that there was once superior culture, advanced, wise, and now buried beneath the sea, is deeply romantic. It offers hope that there are still great secrets waiting to be discovered, that our ancestors knew more than we give them credit for. Moreover, Atlantis has become entwined with pseudoscience and fringe theories. Writers like Ignatius Donnelly, in the 19th century, popularized the idea that Atlantis was the root of all ancient civilizations, spreading technology, language, and culture across the globe. Donnelly's 1882 book Atlantis, the antediluvian world, inspired waves of speculation, linking Atlantis to everything from the pyramids of Egypt to the Mayan temples of Central America. In the 20th century, Atlantis was further popularized by the New Age movement and authors like Graham Hancock, who argue that forgotten advanced civilization existed before the last ice age and was wiped out in a global cataclysm. These ideas, while compelling, often rely on selective interpretations of evidence and improving claims. Mainstream scientists argue that such theories distract from real archaeology, which has revealed many lost civilizations, like the Indus Valley, the Olmecs, or Göbekli Tepe, that were once thought mythical or mysterious. These were real, complex societies whose stories were buried by time and rediscovered through patient, methodical research, not through wild conjecture. So, what does science say about Atlantis today? In summary, there is no physical evidence for a sunken Atlantis-like continent. Plato is the sole primary source of the story, and he likely intended it as allegory, not literal history. Natural disasters and real historical collapses may have inspired parts of the myth. The allure of Atlantis persists because it feeds a deep human desire for discovery, mystery, and meaning. But while science may cast doubt on the literal existence of Atlantis, it doesn't diminish the value of the myth. In fact, it enhances our appreciation of how legends evolve, how they reflect our hopes and fears, and how they drive us to seek truths hidden beneath the surface, both literally and metaphorically. In our next segment, we'll shift focus to how Atlantis has impacted culture, literature, and film, from ancient times to the modern era. How has this lost world been portrayed in our stories? And why does it continue to captivate our imagination? The legend of Atlantis has not only intrigued scholars and scientists, it has captured the imagination of artists, writers, filmmakers, and dreamers across centuries. From ancient philosophical texts to modern blockbuster films, Atlantis has evolved from Plato's philosophical allegory into a powerful cultural symbol, a place of beauty, mystery, loss, and even hope. In this segment, we explore how the idea of Atlantis has been interpreted, reinvented, and mythologized through time, revealing not just the story of a lost civilization, but the timeless appeal of imagining what once was and what might still be found. 1. From philosophy to fantasy, Atlantis in early literature. Plato's original writings in Timaeus and Critias were not meant to be historical accounts. As we discussed earlier, he used Atlantis as a moral parable, a cautionary tale about arrogance, corruption, and divine punishment. The story was largely ignored for centuries after his death. Ancient historians like Herodotus and Thucydides made no mention of it, and Aristotle, Plato's student, reportedly dismissed it as fiction. However, during the Renaissance, a period of renewed interest in classical texts, Plato's dialogues were rediscovered. Humanist scholars began to speculate that Atlantis might have been a real place, lost beneath the sea. This idea took hold particularly in the wake of the Age of Exploration, when new lands were being discovered and the boundaries of the known world expanded. Suddenly, the idea of a lost, advanced civilization didn't seem so far-fetched. 2. Atlantis and utopian ideals. By the 16th and 17th centuries, Atlantis began to appear in utopian literature. Writers like Francis Bacon, in his work The New Atlantis, 1627, imagined it as a society ruled by reason, science, and virtue, a paradise of enlightenment and knowledge. In Bacon's vision, Atlantis wasn't a tale of warning, but a dream of human potential. His fictional island was home to advanced laboratories, harmonious social structures, and benevolent leaders. It reflected Renaissance ideals, envisioning what society might become if guided by rational thought. This shift marked an important turning point. Atlantis was no longer just a lost world. It became a blueprint for a better one. 3. The 19th century revival, Atlantis and pseudoscience. Atlantis surged back into public consciousness during the 19th century, thanks largely to Ignatius Donnelly, an American congressman, amateur scientist, and passionate believer in ancient mysteries. His 1882 book Atlantis. The antediluvian world claimed that Atlantis was the origin of all ancient civilizations, Egyptian, Greek, Mayan, and beyond. Donnelly argued that a mighty civilization once spanned the Atlantic, and that its remnants could be seen in the similarities between architecture, mythology, and astronomy around the globe. His theories weren't based on hard evidence, but they were persuasive and imaginative, appealing to a public eager for romance and mystery. Donnelly's ideas laid the foundation for many modern myths. From the concept of global flood legends to belief that ancient aliens or hyper-advanced humans seeded early civilizations. Though debunked by scholars, these theories continue to influence popular culture. For Atlantis in fiction and film. In the 20th century, Atlantis became a fixture of fantasy and science fiction. It appeared in pulp magazines, adventure novels, comic books, and films, each time reshaped to fit contemporary anxieties and dreams. Authors like Jules Verne and H. Rider Haggard use the Atlantis myth as a backdrop for tales of exploration and wonder. In comic books, Atlantis became home to Aquaman, the superhero ruler of an underwater kingdom. It evolved from a sunken ruin into a thriving civilization beneath the sea, complete with futuristic technology and ancient wisdom. Hollywood, too, embraced Atlantis. Disney's Atlantis, The Lost Empire, 2001, reimagined the legend as an epic adventure filled with steampunk aesthetics and a mysterious power source. Meanwhile, films like Stargate, Atlantis, or even Justice League gave the lost world a sci-fi twist, portraying it as a hub of ancient technology or supernatural energy. These modern interpretations often reflect our own cultural values and concerns. In a time of climate change and rising sea levels, Atlantis becomes a metaphor for environmental disaster. In an era of space exploration, it stands for lost knowledge and the possibility of rediscovery. 5. Atlantis and the New Age movement. During the 1960s and 70s, Atlantis gained popularity among New Age spiritualists who believed the lost continent had been home to an enlightened race, psychic, technologically advanced, and deeply connected to the cosmos. Authors like Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet, claimed to receive visions of Atlantis through dreams and trances. Cayce predicted that parts of Atlantis would rise again in the 1960s, and that its ancient wisdom would be recovered to guide humanity into a new spiritual age. While these claims have no scientific basis, they underscore how Atlantis has become a spiritual symbol, a source of ancient power, hidden truth, and cosmic destiny for many believers. 6. Atlantis today, meme, myth, or mirror. Today, Atlantis occupies a strange space in our cultural consciousness. It's both a serious archaeological mystery and a symbol of fantasy. It appears in academic debates and children's cartoons. It's referenced in conspiracy theories, New Age teachings, video games, and global tourism. Why does it endure? Because Atlantis represents more than a place. It's an idea, a dream of what once was, or what might have been, a mirror reflecting our greatest hopes and deepest fears. The yearning to uncover forgotten knowledge. The warning that no civilization, no matter how mighty, is immune to collapse. Whether it was real or not, Atlantis continues to challenge and inspire us. It remains a story we return to again and again, each generation reshaping it to fit the world it lives in. In our next segment, we'll explore the psychological and symbolic power of Atlantis. What does it reveal about human nature, and why are we drawn to stories of lost worlds? The story of Atlantis has endured for over 2 millennia, longer than most myths, legends, or historical tales. What is it about this lost civilization that captures the human imagination so powerfully? Why do people across cultures, eras, and backgrounds keep returning to the idea of Atlantis? In this segment, we delve into the psychological and symbolic significance of Atlantis. We explore how this myth taps into deep human desires, fears, and archetypes, explaining why it resonates so strongly and why it might continue to do so far into the future. 1. The allure of the unknown. At its core, Atlantis is a story about the unknown, a mysterious place lost beneath the waves, hidden from a map of the world. Humans are naturally curious creatures, driven to explore and understand the unfamiliar. This drive is embedded in our survival as a species. Curiosity leads to discovery, innovation, and growth. The mystery of Atlantis offers a tantalizing possibility that there is still something great and powerful beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. It is a symbol of hidden knowledge, a puzzle challenging us to look beyond what we know and to imagine worlds beyond our reach. This hunger for discovery keeps the story alive. Every new scientific expedition, underwater survey, or archaeological dig brings a hope, however faint, that the lost world might finally be found. 2. The fear of loss and catastrophe. Atlantis is also a story about catastrophe and loss. Plato's account ends with the complete destruction of an entire civilization, sunk beneath the sea, wiped off the face of the earth. This catastrophic ending echoes some of humanity's deepest fears. The sudden, overwhelming loss of everything we build, the fragility of our existence, and the possibility that even the mightiest societies can fall. In a world increasingly aware of climate change, natural disasters, and geopolitical instability, the myth of Atlantis serves as a cautionary tale. It reminds us that hubris, greed, and environmental neglect can lead to ruin. The story urges vigilance and humility, reflecting anxieties that are all too relevant today. 3. The ideal society and human potential. Despite its tragic end, Atlantis also represents an ideal society. A civilization marked by advanced technology, harmony with nature, and spiritual wisdom. For many, Atlantis embodies the dream of a perfect world, a utopia that humans once inhabited or might someday create. This aspiration reflects our innate hope that humanity can rise above its flaws and achieve greatness. The tension between Atlantis as a warning and Atlantis as an ideal reflect a broader human struggle, the balance between ambition and responsibility, progress and ethics. For archetypes and collective unconscious, Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology, theorized about the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of symbols and archetypes common to all human cultures. From this perspective, Atlantis might be understood not as a literal lost continent, but as an archetypal myth. Atlantis embodies the archetype of the lost golden age, a perfect time and place that was lost due to human error. Similar myths exist across cultures. The Garden of Eden in Judeo-Christian tradition, the Hindu concept of Satya Yuga, the Age of Truth, or the Chinese myth of the peach blossom spring. These myths serve psychological functions. They provide a narrative framework for understanding human history and suffering, and they offer hope for renewal and redemption. 5. Atlantis is a mirror of our time. One reason Atlantis keeps resurfacing in popular culture and theory is that it reflects contemporary hopes and fears. In the Renaissance, it symbolized enlightenment and scientific progress. In the 19th century, it became entwined with imperialism and racial theories. Today, it is a metaphor for environmental collapse, lost wisdom, and global connectivity. Atlantis is a cultural Rorschach test. People project onto it what they most desire or dread. It is a flexible symbol that can be adapted to many narratives, from heroic rediscovery to dystopian warning. 6. The power of storytelling. Finally, the enduring power of Atlantis comes down to the human love of storytelling. Myths like Atlantis are vehicles for exploring universal themes: power, loss, discovery, morality, and identity. The story has a compelling narrative arc. A great civilization rises, thrives, and falls. It has mystery, drama, and a moral lesson. These elements make it memorable and meaningful. Stories like Atlantis help us make sense of our place in the world. They connect us to the past, give shape to our fears and dreams, and inspire us to imagine the future. Closing thoughts. Atlantis may never be found beneath the sea, and it may never have existed as Plato described. But its true power lies not in its physical reality, but in its symbolic meaning. It reminds us that civilizations are fragile, knowledge is precious, and the human spirit is endlessly curious and hopeful. Atlantis endures because it speaks to fundamental truths about who we are and who we might become. In our final segment, we'll summarize what we've learned, look at some of the most compelling theories once more, and consider what the future might hold for the search for Atlantis. After exploring the legend, history, cultural impact, and psychological significance of Atlantis, we arrive at the present moment. What does Atlantis mean to us today? Is the search for this lost world still relevant, or is it simply a myth destined to remain beneath the waves of history? In this final segment, we'll look at how Atlantis continues to inspire exploration, debate, and imagination, and what the future might hold for this timeless mystery. 1. Modern scientific investigations. Despite skepticism from mainstream archaeology and geology, Atlantis remains a topic of active research and investigation. Advances in underwater exploration technology have enabled scientists to survey ocean floors and submerged structures with unprecedented precision. Locations proposed as potential sites for Atlantis include the Azores Islands, a group of volcanic islands in the mid-Atlantic Ocean that some believe could be remnants of Atlantis' peaks, the Santorini Thera eruption site. The Minoan civilization on this Aegean island suffered a massive volcanic eruption around 1600 BC, leading some researchers to suggest this event inspired Plato's Atlantis story. The Caribbean and Bahamas, Underwater structures like the Bimini Road have been cited by enthusiasts as evidence of ancient submerged cities. The Rick-Hat structure, Eye of the Sahara, located in Mauritania, its circular formation has intrigued some researchers as a possible inspiration for Atlantis' description. However, no definitive evidence has emerged to conclusively identify any of these sites as the fabled Atlantis. Most experts regard Atlantis as a legendary myth, with no archaeological proof. 2. Atlantis in popular media and tourism. The story of Atlantis continues to be a vibrant element in entertainment, from novels and video games to movies and documentaries. Its enduring allure helps fuel tourism in places associated with the myth, such as the Greek island of Santorini, the Azores, or the Bahamas. Theme parks, museums, and online communities celebrate Atlantis, keeping its myth alive for new generations. 3. Atlantis and environmental awareness. In recent decades, Atlantis has become a powerful metaphor for environmental caution. The story's warning about the fall of a great civilization due to its hubris resonates with concerns about climate change, rising sea levels, and ecological collapse. Atlantis reminds us that no society, no matter how advanced, is immune to the consequences of environmental neglect. This symbolic use encourages reflection on how humanity must care for our planet to avoid becoming a cautionary tale ourselves. 4. The role of technology and future discoveries. As technology advances, new tools like satellite imaging, deep-sea drones, and artificial intelligence analysis increase the chances of discovering submerged ruins or ancient cities. Projects like remote sensing archaeology scan vast areas for hidden structures, and underwater archaeology is making strides in documenting sites like shipwrecks and submerged settlements. While it's uncertain if Atlantis itself will ever be found, the ongoing exploration contributes to our understanding of ancient human history and cultural development. 5. Atlantis as inspiration for innovation. Beyond literal searches, Atlantis inspires creative innovation. Writers, artists, scientists, and visionaries use the myth as a canvas for imagining new technologies, societies, and futures. In a world grappling with rapid change, Atlantis symbolizes both hope and warning, the potential to build wonders and the risk of losing them. 6. Why the quest continues. The quest for Atlantis is more than an archaeological pursuit. It's a journey into our collective consciousness. It embodies our deepest desires to connect with the past, understand ourselves, and find meaning in history. Every generation reinterprets Atlantis according to its values and challenges. Whether viewed as myth or reality, Atlantis continues to inspire questions about civilization, morality, and destiny. Closing summary. Atlantis originated as a philosophical allegory in Plato's writings. Over centuries, it grew into a global legend symbolizing lost knowledge, ideal societies, and catastrophic downfall. The myth's flexibility allows it to resonate through culture, psychology, and spirituality. Despite no definitive archaeological proof, the search for Atlantis spurs scientific inquiry and fuels imagination. Atlantis serves as both a cautionary tale and a symbol of human potential. Its story encourages us to reflect on how we live today and what future we want to create. Thank you for joining this deep dive into Atlantis Revealed, Legend, Lie, or Lost World. If you enjoyed this series, be sure to subscribe to the Crit Stories for more fascinating explorations of history's greatest mysteries. What do you think? Could Atlantis be waiting to be found, or is it best understood as a powerful myth? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments below.